The moment I locked the venue doors from the inside, my hands were trembling, not from regret, but from the kind of fierce peace that only comes after decades of being silenced. My wedding had just begun, and I could hear the soft swell of music starting inside the garden hall. But outside those tall white doors, chaos was erupting. "Ava, open this door right now!" My mother's voice cracked like thunder across the courtyard. She pounded on the ornate wooden doors so hard I could hear the echo reverberating through the hall. Behind her, my three siblings stood stiff and silent, too proud to yell, but not proud enough to stay away. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, one hand resting on the iron handle, the other holding my bouquet tighter. The air smelled like peonies and rain, but the weight in my chest smelled like closure. This wasn't some oversight. This wasn't a mistake. I didn't send them an invite, not because it got lost in the mail, not because I forgot. I made the choice. Behind me, Jenna, my maid of honor, and the only sister I'd ever truly had, peeked out from the hall. "They're not your problem today, Ava," she said softly, her hand on my shoulder. "Let them scream. We've got a wedding to do." I took a breath, closed my eyes, and let the sound of my mother's voice melt away. "We're your family. You'll regret this," she wailed. Regret? I'd spent the better part of 2 decades regretting every time I begged to be included in their milestones, only to be reminded I was just an afterthought. They told me I was too young, too dramatic, too sensitive, and now I was too tired. Tired of pretending, tired of hoping. So I turned, not with anger, but with resolve. The kind that settles in your bones when you've finally stopped apologizing for existing. As the doors clicked shut behind me, the hall glowed with golden light filtering through the trees. The music swelled. My guests, my real family, stood, smiling, teary-eyed. I stepped onto the aisle, my dress shimmered, my heart beat steady. This was my moment. Outside, they screamed my name like it was a weapon. Inside, I walked toward peace, and I didn't look back. My name is Ava, and for most of my life, I felt like a ghost in my own family. I was the 5th child, unexpected, unplanned, and, if we're being honest, mostly unwanted. My parents had already gone through the motions. 3 boys and 1 girl, all spaced 2 years apart, a perfectly symmetrical family portrait. Then I came along 5 years later, the oops that cracked the frame. Growing up, I used to wonder if maybe I'd done something wrong just by being born. Our house was always loud, chaotic, full of voices that didn't have time for mine. My brothers, James, Derek, and Ryan, were each carbon copies of my dad. Confident, brash, athletic, always pushing each other toward bigger, louder achievements. My sister Claire was the crown jewel, graceful, popular, the one who always had her room, her birthday parties, her spotlight. And me, I was the girl who got the hand-me-downs nobody wanted, the one who stayed quiet so she wouldn't be a bother, the one who sat in the backseat of the van during family trips, headphones on, pretending the music could drown out how invisible she felt. I don't remember a time when I felt truly seen by them, not during holidays, not on birthdays, not even when I graduated high school with honors and none of them showed up. But here's the thing, I didn't grow up bitter, not at first. As a kid, I adored them. I followed Claire around like a shadow, hoping one day she'd let me do her makeup or share her secrets. I used to sneak into the garage to watch my brothers fix their bikes, pretending I was just as brave, just as cool. When Derek left for college, I cried for 2 days, even though he never once let me into his room. I was desperate to belong. For a while, I convinced myself that if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, and tried to be good, they'd eventually let me in. I'd get a seat at the big kids' table, a role in their stories. I'd be more than just the little one. But year after year, I stayed on the sidelines. Claire's Sweet 16 came and went. I wasn't even allowed to stay for the party. I was too young. Ryan's graduation dinner was held at a steakhouse. I stayed home with a frozen pizza. When Derek got engaged, I wrote him a poem. He never read it. The older I got, the clearer it became. I wasn't just younger, I was. My parents didn't help, they were tired. That's what they always said. We've been through this 4 times already, they'd sigh, waving off my questions or concerns. You'll understand when you're older, but I did understand. Just not the way they wanted. I understood that love in my family came with conditions, with checkboxes, and somehow I never ticked the right ones. I was the bookworm, the quiet one, the girl who liked writing stories more than going to parties. I kept journals hidden under my mattress, pages filled with made-up families who listened, who laughed together, who cared. It wasn't until I turned 16 that I realized the distance between me and them wasn't shrinking, it was growing wider with every year. There was this one night, I still think about it sometimes, when I came home from a school play. I'd had a lead role, and it was the first time I'd truly felt proud of something. I walked in, clutching my bouquet of cheap grocery store flowers, hoping someone would ask how it went. No one was even in the living room. I found Mom in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, gave me a half smile, and said, "Oh, that was tonight?" I nodded. "Yeah, it went well. That's great, sweetie," she interrupted, already back to her screen. "Can you set the table? Your brothers are coming for dinner." That was the moment it clicked. I could be brilliant and it wouldn't matter. I could win awards and perform for crowds, and they'd still only see me as the girl who came last. I stopped trying so hard after that. Not out of rebellion, out of survival. I started writing more, staying in my room more, and creating stories where girls like me were heroes, not footnotes. In one of those stories, a girl grows up forgotten, but when she becomes a woman, she finds her voice. She learns that being left out isn't her failure, it's their loss. And eventually she stops asking for a seat at their table. She builds her own, and this time she chooses who gets to sit beside her. That girl is me, and that's how I met Liam. Liam wasn't loud or flashy like my brothers. He didn't demand attention, he earned it. We met at a nonprofit writing workshop. I was there as a volunteer assistant, still unsure if I even belonged in the room. He was the instructor. Confident, kind, and somehow able to make every person feel like their words mattered, including me. He noticed me on the first day, not because I tried to be noticed, but because he paid attention. "You have a writer's soul," he told me once after I nervously read one of my short stories aloud. I laughed. "That just means I like hiding behind metaphors." "No," he said, his voice calm. "It means you've been surviving in silence, but your voice is stronger than you think." No one had ever said something like that to me before. Not my parents, not my siblings, not a teacher, no one. Liam didn't try to fix me. He didn't push me to confront my family or dredge up old pain. He just made space for me. And over time, that space turned into safety. That safety turned into love. When he proposed 3 years later under a sky full of fireworks on New Year's Eve, I didn't hesitate. For the first time in my life, someone had chosen me, fully, no conditions, no hesitation. And when we started planning our wedding, I knew exactly what kind of day I wanted. Not the grand spectacle my siblings had thrown, not the performance they used to show the world how perfect they were. I wanted something small, honest, joyful. I wanted to be surrounded by people who saw me, not who tolerated me, who loved me, not who dismissed me. That's when the decision became clear. I wasn't going to invite my family, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood my worth. They had built a world where I never belonged, and now I was building my own from scratch, with love, with honesty, with intention, with Liam. The first crack in my illusion of family came dressed in lace and white roses. I was 10 when Claire, my sister, announced her engagement. The entire household burst into chaotic joy. Flowers were ordered, wine bottles clinked in celebration, and swatches of satin were scattered across the dining table like confetti. I hovered nearby, watching her glow, listening to her talk about centerpieces and bridesmaids, hoping, asking to be part of it all. I made her a card with glitter pens and heart stickers. She barely glanced at it. A few weeks before the wedding, I overheard a phrase that would haunt my teenage years. It's going to be a child-free event. I thought that didn't include me. I wasn't just a kid, I was her sister. But then Mom sat me down and explained, in that overly gentle tone that always meant something was about to hurt, that I wouldn't be attending. Claire wanted the ceremony to feel elegant, mature, no distractions. I nodded, smiled, pretended I understood, then cried into my pillow until I couldn't breathe. That should have been the only time, but life had other plans. At 13, Ryan's wedding invitation went out. To everyone except me. Another adult-only affair. Another forced smile from Mom. Another, "You'll have your special day one day, honey." At 15, Derek got engaged. I knew better than to hope. The pattern had been set. Still, a small piece of me cracked when his fiancée posted a group photo of the bridesmaids, all of them familiar family faces. All of them are older. I wasn't even asked to be a flower girl, but the worst came at 17. James, the brother I used to adore, he once helped me build a fort in the backyard during a thunderstorm. He taught me how to climb trees. He used to say I was the only one who got his jokes. When he called to tell me he was engaged, I felt that old flicker of excitement rise again. Maybe this time, I thought. Maybe he remembered me. But a week later, I got a text. "Hey, kiddo, just wanted to let you know, the venue is super small and it's adults only. Don't take it personally, okay?" I stared at the screen until it blurred. But it wasn't just the exclusion. It was who was invited. Cousin Mia, 16 at the time, was in the bridal party. Mia, who once stuck gum in my hair at Thanksgiving. Mia, who had called me the ghost sibling. She got a seat, a dress, a photo in the family album. I got silence. That was when it shifted. The ache turned into something else. Not rage, not yet, but the kind of bone-deep sadness that no apology could undo. It wasn't about weddings anymore. It was about erasure. My siblings crafted milestone after milestone without me, and every time they made it look like I never existed. Photos cropped, stories retold. When friends came over, they asked if I was an only child, and honestly, sometimes I felt like one. So I tried. At family dinners, I'd ask about their lives. They'd give me one-word answers. I'd bring desserts to birthdays I wasn't invited to. I sent texts, birthday cards, little notes. None were ever acknowledged. One summer, I overheard Claire at a barbecue. She was talking to a friend. "Ava's just always been kind of distant," she said, "a little cold." I almost laughed out loud. Distant? Cold? I'd spent my childhood screaming into a void of smiles that didn't see me. By the time I started college, I was done begging. That was when I wrote a short story for my creative writing class. It was about a girl raised in a house of mirrors, each one showing her what she wasn't, not smart enough, not pretty enough, not lovable enough. In the end, she smashed them all and walked away barefoot into the rain. My professor cried when he read it. It was published in a campus journal. I didn't tell my family, but they found out anyway. My mother called me furious. "How could you write something like that? People will think it's about us." I didn't answer because it was about them. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for telling the truth. What hurt most wasn't the exclusion, it was how easily they pretended I didn't belong until I dared to speak. After that story, I stopped going home for the holidays. I spent Christmas with friends and Thanksgiving with classmates. No one from my family noticed until I stopped replying to the group chat. Then came the accusations. You changed. You're selfish. You're tearing this family apart. But I hadn't changed. I'd just stopped apologizing for existing. And that to them was unforgivable. The final straw came in my third year of college. I'd started dating Liam by then, a calm, thoughtful man who saw me in a way no one in my family ever had. He asked one night while we were cooking dinner in his tiny kitchen, "So, do you think your siblings will come to our wedding one day?" I froze with the spatula in hand. "I don't know," I said slowly. "They never invited me to theirs." He stopped chopping vegetables and looked at me like I'd just confessed to a war crime. I shrugged. It's not a big deal. But even I didn't believe that anymore. He didn't say much after that, just kissed the top of my head. But the next day, he left a note on my laptop. "You deserve a front row seat to love, always." And something about that undid me. That weekend, my cousin Sarah messaged me, "Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. There's some talk in the family chat that you've distanced yourself. Claire says you're being dramatic again. Just thought you should know." Dramatic. Again. It didn't matter what I said or didn't say. My existence alone was too loud for them. That night, I sat down with my laptop and made a decision. When I got married, I wouldn't play pretend. I wouldn't invite ghosts and blood ties to haunt the happiest day of my life. I wouldn't smile through gritted teeth while people who discarded me clapped politely. My wedding would be different. It would be mine. And for the first time, they wouldn't have a say. That was the moment the war began. Not with shouting, not with confrontation, but with silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that heals. The decision not to invite them should have been the end of it. Quiet, clean. But of course, it wasn't. 2 months before the wedding, my phone rang. It was Mom. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks, not since the short story scandal, so when her name popped up, I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was overly sweet, fake lightness coating every word like syrup over something spoiled. "Hi, sweetheart. How's wedding planning going?" I already knew where this was going. "It's going well." A pause. Then, "Your siblings haven't received their invitations yet. Did something get lost in the mail?" I didn't answer right away. My silence said everything. "You did send them, right?" I exhaled. "No, I did." Another pause, the kind that could split time in half. "Excuse me?" Her voice hardened. "You're not inviting your family?" "They're not my family," I said quietly. "Not in the ways that matter." What followed was a tirade I could have written myself. "You're being childish. They didn't mean to hurt you. This is just payback. You're throwing away decades of love." Love? Where was the love when I sat home in my best dress, waiting for a wedding I wasn't allowed to attend? Where was the love when they laughed about memories I wasn't part of, forgot my birthday, or called me dramatic for having feelings? I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just said, "This is my wedding, I get to choose who shows up." She hung up. That night, the group chat lit up like wildfire. "Claire, heard you're banning us from your wedding, classy move." "Seriously, you're gonna alienate the whole family over your victim complex." "Ryan, grow up, Ava. We didn't invite you because you were a kid, not because we hated you." James said nothing. That somehow made it worse. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had said it all before, just in silence they never listened to. But silence is only acceptable when it protects them. Now that I was the one enforcing distance, they couldn't stand it. The next morning, my dad called. Calm, reasonable, the good cop to her bad cop. "Eva," he began, "you know your mother's upset." "I know. She cried all night." I stared at the ceiling. "She always cries when she's not in control." He sighed. "This isn't the way. You can't just cut out your family." "I'm not cutting anyone out," I said. "I'm just not dragging them into a space where they never wanted me." Then came the final card. The manipulation is masterstroke. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "One day, you'll miss us. And we won't be there." And for once, the threat, it felt like peace. In the days that followed, things escalated. Claire posted a Facebook status, "Sad when some people forget what family means. Heartbroken, still love you anyway." My cousin tagged me in it. I blocked them both. Aunt Linda called, urging me to rise above, to be the bigger person. "Family is forever," she said. "No," I told her, "pain isn't forever, not if you choose to stop carrying it." Then came the dinner. A week before my wedding, I found out Claire and Mom had organized a family gathering on the same day, an anti-wedding, a spectacle designed to twist the narrative. Since we weren't invited, Claire had said, we thought we'd celebrate family anyway. I should have been furious. Instead, I laughed. Let them gather, let them roast chicken and mashed potatoes while pretending they hadn't excluded me from every family milestone since I was 10. Let them call it unity. I called it irony. On the day of their so-called family dinner, Jenna sent me a photo. It was blurry, taken from someone's Instagram story before they could delete it. My parents, my siblings, and some cousins, all gathered around a dining table lit by candles and smugness. The caption read, "Real family shows up." I showed it to Liam. He didn't say anything, just shook his head and poured me another glass of wine. "They're spiraling," he said, "because they lost control of the narrative." I nodded, but it still hurt. Not because I wanted to be there, but because for the first time they wanted me to want to be there. And now that I didn't, they were rewriting the script to make me the villain. A few days later, I got an email from James. Yes, an actual email, like it was 2005 again. The subject line said, "Let's talk." Inside was a wall of text, paragraph after paragraph about forgiveness, family unity, and how life was too short to harbor grudges. He even had the gall to quote a Bible verse at the end. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my wedding spreadsheet and deleted his name from the optional invite column I had once briefly considered done. Then came the last straw. My mom showed up, unannounced, on my doorstep, 4 days before the wedding. I opened the door in my pajamas, coffee in hand. Her eyes were puffy, her voice is wobbly. "Please, Ava, don't do this." I leaned against the frame. "Do what, Mom?" "Don't throw us away." "I'm not throwing anyone away, I'm just choosing peace." She tried to step inside. Liam appeared behind me, gently placing a hand on my back. "You've made your point," she said sharply. "Now let us be part of your day." "No," I said. "Why not?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "Because you never let me be part of yours." She blinked, like I'd slapped her. Then she turned and left. She didn't say goodbye. I closed the door and exhaled so hard my lungs hurt. That night, I wrote in my journal, "This time, they're the ones outside the door, and I'm the one who gets to choose." The next morning, I woke up to a storm of notifications. Apparently, after leaving my place, Mom had called Claire, and Claire did what she always did best, create drama with an audience, and posted a long performative post about how she tried everything to make peace, but some people live for the grudge. She attached an old photo of the 5 of us as kids, standing awkwardly in matching Christmas sweaters. "She's still my sister," the caption said, "even if she forgot." The comments were a flood of pity and passive aggression. "So sorry, Claire, you deserve better. Families should never treat each other this way." And the classic, "Maybe Ava will grow up someday." I wanted to scream, not because they didn't get it, but because they never tried to. I showed the post to Liam. He read it in silence, then turned to me. "You still want to go through with this wedding?" he asked gently, not out of doubt, but out of love. I nodded. More than ever. Because this wasn't just about a wedding anymore. It was about reclaiming my story and I was done letting them write the chapters. 3 days later, I walked into the final wedding rehearsal like a woman on fire. Jenna squeezed my hand. You okay? I will be, I whispered. Because despite all the noise, all the guilt, all the backhanded pity posts and whispered accusations, my wedding was going to be mine. No ghosts, no apologies. No empty seats were saved for people who never made room for me. And when I stood at the altar, I knew I wasn't just marrying Liam, I was marrying peace. Finally, the night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. Not from nerves about the ceremony, the vows, or even the logistics. Jenna had triple-checked the florist and the caterer. Liam's mom had already wrangled his cousins into transportation duty. Everything was under control, except for my mind. I lay there in the quiet, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me, feeling the weight of years pressing down. Not the weight of regret, but the weight of finally letting go. And letting go doesn't come easy when you've spent your entire life trying to hold on to people, to love, to an idea of family that never loved you back the way you needed. I thought I'd feel free. Instead, I felt hollow. Jenna came in around 2 a.m., barefoot, holding 2 mugs of chamomile tea. I figured you weren't sleeping. I sat up and accepted the mug. She studied me in the dim light. You okay? Nodded, yeah. Just sad. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, you know it's okay to feel both things, right? Joy and grief, peace and loss. I looked down at the tea. I just wanted them to care. That's all. I didn't need them to be perfect. I just wanted to matter. Jenna leaned her head against mine. You do matter. You just needed the right audience. I smiled, but it didn't reach inside. That hollow feeling followed me into the morning. Even as my makeup artist buzzed around me, even as my dress zipped up perfectly, even as guests arrived and the garden lit up with laughter and champagne, a small part of me still whispered, they should have been here. Not because they deserved to be, but because I had always imagined it. Not Claire or Derek or even James, but Mom. She should have been the one fixing my veil, telling me how beautiful I looked, crying over memories. But instead, it was Jenna. And thank God for her. When the ceremony began and the music played, I forced myself to breathe in rhythm. Breathe in and walk forward. Breathe out, let go. Liam stood at the altar, eyes wide, full of so much love it nearly broke me in half. And for a moment, just a moment, all the weight disappeared. He smiled like the sun itself had come down to witness us. And suddenly, everything was worth it. But peace is never a permanent guest. It visits, it soothes, and then it slips out quietly when no one's looking. Halfway through the reception, Jenna pulled me aside. Her face had that tight, practiced calm that only shows up when something's wrong. What is it? I asked. She hesitated. They are here. I blinked. Who? Claire, and your mom, and Derek. They showed up outside the venue. My stomach dropped. Are they trying to come in? They asked the front desk if they could surprise you. I could feel the panic rise like bile. All the work I'd done, the boundaries I'd built, threatened to crumble with a single knock at the gate. Jenna squeezed my arm. Do you want me to handle it? I shook my head, heart pounding. No. I'll do it. I slipped away from the crowd and walked to the gate. There they were, Claire, arms crossed, wearing what I recognized as her funeral dress, dramatic, black, and inappropriate. My mom was red-eyed but still made up. And Derek, standing stiff as someone dragged him here. Claire smiled when she saw me. We didn't want to miss your big day. I stared at her. You already missed all the big days. Mom stepped forward. Ava, please. Let us in, just for a moment. I looked her straight in the eyes. You had your moments, all of them. Claire scoffed. So this is it, huh? You cut out your family because of some childhood drama? It wasn't drama, I said, voice steady. It was abandonment. I turned to the venue manager. They're not guests. Please escort them off the property. Mom started crying. Claire cursed. Derek just looked away. But I didn't flinch. I walked back into my wedding and didn't look back. When I returned, Liam was waiting at the edge of the dance floor. He didn't ask what happened. He just held me. And I finally cried. Oh, for them? But for the girl I used to be. The one who waited in her best dress by the window. The one who cried herself to sleep after every wedding she wasn't allowed to attend. The one who thought love meant begging. That girl was gone, buried beneath vows and roses and the quiet power of saying no more. Later that night, after the cake was cut and the last song faded into the quiet hum of midnight, Liam and I returned to our suite. I kicked off my shoes, tossed the bouquet onto the chair, and collapsed onto the bed with a groan. Liam sat beside me, brushing a curl from my face. You were incredible today. I laughed softly. I feel like I've run a marathon through emotional landmines. He kissed my forehead. You survived. No, I whispered. I won. Because it was true. They tried everything, guilt, pressure, spectacle, to make the story about them. But I had rewritten the narrative. This wasn't a wedding marred by absence. It was a celebration sharpened by it, by knowing who I didn't need, by embracing who showed up, not out of obligation, but out of love. I opened my phone to dozens of messages, some from distant cousins sending congratulations, some from unknown numbers, likely more family backlash. I blocked them all. That night, Liam and I slowly danced barefoot in our suite. No music playing, just the echo of a love that needed no audience. The next morning, as the sun streamed through the curtains, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Not just quiet, but stillness. Like my soul had unclenched. Over breakfast, I looked across at Liam, who was buttering toast with the precision of a man solving a crime. He looked up, saw me watching, and grinned. What? Just thank you. For what? For being the first person to make me feel like I wasn't broken, for wanting to be loved. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You were never broken. They just didn't know how to love someone who saw the cracks in their perfection. I smiled, tears prickling. I think I'm finally okay. You're more than okay, he said. You're free. And for the first time, I believed him. That afternoon, as we packed for a short honeymoon getaway, I slipped one final thing into my suitcase. A photo. Not of them, but of me. A photo Jenna had taken years ago on a random summer day, where I was laughing so hard my eyes were shut and my hair was a mess from the wind. That girl in the photo, she hadn't known what was coming, the exclusion, the ache. But she laughed anyway, and I owed it to her to keep laughing now, because no one could take that from me anymore. No guilt, no ghost, no sister's cold stare or mother's trembling voice. They had written me out of their stories long ago. I was finally writing my own, and it was beautiful. 6 months passed since the wedding. 6 months of learning what peace felt like. Not just silence, but the absence of fear, of guilt, of tiptoeing around people who never bothered to notice whether you were bleeding. Liam and I settled into married life like two puzzle pieces finally given the right corner of the box. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Some mornings we argued over laundry. On other nights, we stayed up too late watching bad documentaries and eating popcorn for dinner. And in the quiet spaces between, I found myself again. Or maybe I met her for the first time. The version of me who no longer needed to justify her absence from a toxic dinner table. The woman didn't flinch when her phone rang from an unknown number. The girl who had once cried over not being invited, now laughing over brunch with friends who showed up for her every time without being asked. I didn't speak to my mom again. Not after she showed up at my apartment uninvited one last time a month after the wedding. Not after she yelled and cried and begged and accused in the same breath. Not after she said, "You'll always be a disappointment unless you come back to this family." That day, I looked her in the eyes and said, "If disappointment means peace, then I accept it." I closed the door behind her, and I haven't opened it since. Some of my extended family still try. Birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. They send polite texts or tag me in old photos online, but they never acknowledge what happened, never apologize, never take responsibility. And that's the thing I've learned about healing. You don't need the apology to move on. You need to accept that it may never come, that the people who hurt you might never see it the way you do. And you love yourself enough to choose peace anyway. Liam supported me every step. He never tried to fix me. He just walked beside me while I fixed myself. In the spring, we planted herbs on the apartment balcony. Basil, mint, rosemary, tiny green promises of growth. I used to kill every plant I touched. Now they thrived under my care. Funny how that works. When you stop spending all your energy proving your worth to the wrong people, you finally have the energy to nurture the right things. I got promoted at work. A quiet email on a Tuesday morning, my manager said, "We've noticed how much you've stepped up lately." I cried in the break room, not because of the title, but because someone noticed. No, I told Liam that night, and he twirled me around the living room like I'd won the lottery. And maybe I had not just the job, but the life, unbuilt from bricks no one else could tear down. A life where I made the rules. And I kept one rule close to my heart. If someone makes you feel small, you walk away. I'd spent too long shrinking to fit into a family that never wanted to expand to include me. Not anymore. One afternoon in July, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. It was from Rachel. Just seeing her handwriting made my stomach twist. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. It was 3 pages long. Some parts sounded sincere, others sounded rehearsed. She said she missed me, she regretted how things unfolded, that she hoped one day we could sit down and talk like sisters should. I read it once, done again. Then I set it on fire in the kitchen sink, not out of spite, but because I was done rereading chapters from a book that never let me write my pages. Forgiveness doesn't always look like a reunion. Sometimes it looks like a flame, a flick of the wrist, and peace rising with the smoke. The days grew longer, and life fell into a rhythm. Weekends with friends, spontaneous road trips, and lazy mornings filled with pancakes and kisses. There were moments of grief still. Like when I heard a song that used to play in the house growing up, or when I saw families laughing together in the park. But the ache had softened. It didn't consume me anymore. It reminded me that I had survived, and not just survived, but transformed. One evening, while we watched the sunset from our balcony, Liam turned to me and said, "Do you ever think about reaching out to them again?" I thought for a long moment. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I remember what it cost me to get here." He nodded, and we sat in silence, not the heavy kind, but the full, peaceful kind that comes when you know you've made the right choice. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. I just needed this life. The one I'd built with open hands, clear eyes, and a heart that finally knew its worth. Not everyone will understand your boundaries, but that doesn't make them less valid. And not everyone deserves a front row seat to your healing. That's what I've learned. That's what I'll carry forward. This is my ending, not the one they wrote for me, but the one I chose. And it's beautiful. A year later, I stood in front of a small crowd at a local women's workshop, holding a microphone in trembling hands. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, speak publicly, share something so personal. But when the organizer reached out, saying they were hosting a panel on found family and chosen peace, something inside me said yes. I told my story. From being excluded by my siblings to the silence that followed, to the wedding that became my reclamation. And as I spoke, I watched heads nod, hands reach for tissues. Women of all ages connect not just with the pain, but with the freedom. Afterward, people came up to hug me. One woman whispered, "I thought I was the only one." Another said, "You gave me permission to finally set my boundary." It hit me then. This story wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who's ever been told they were too sensitive, too dramatic, too much of a burden. Everyone begged to belong in a family that didn't know how to love them the way they needed. Everyone who thought keeping the peace meant staying silent. I walked off that stage lighter than I'd ever felt. And I knew I wasn't just healing for myself anymore. I was healing for her, the little girl who waited by the window in a dress too fancy for her age, holding on to hope that never came. I was healing for every version of me who cried behind closed doors, wondering why love had conditions she couldn't meet. And I was healing for whoever needed to hear, you don't owe anyone your silence to earn your place. You're already enough. Later that week, I received an email from a college student named Maria. She had been at the workshop. She wrote, "I've never told anyone this, but my siblings stopped talking to me after I came out. I felt like I lost my family. Your story, it made me feel less alone." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I cried. Not the painful kind, the freeing kind. Because in that moment, I understood something that had taken me years to accept. Sometimes your pain becomes someone else's permission to leave, to heal, to demand better, to live without apology. That's the legacy I wanted now. Not the name I was born into, not the family that erased me, but the one I chose to build every single day with truth and love and fire in my belly. I started writing more blogs, essays, and even journaling late at night when I couldn't sleep. Words poured out of me like a river that had finally broken through a dam. It felt good. It felt necessary. And slowly, people began to listen. Not just strangers, but friends, coworkers, even a neighbor who said, "I wish I had your courage." But it wasn't about courage. It was about finally being tired enough of hurting, tired enough to stop explaining myself to people who never listened anyway, tired enough to say, enough is enough. I'm not going to beg to be loved anymore. I'm going to love myself so loudly they can hear it in the silence. This fall, I signed a lease on a small creative studio. It's nothing fancy, just a bright room with secondhand furniture and a kettle that whistles too loudly. But it's mine. And I've started hosting monthly circles there, story sharing nights where people come as they are without shame or fear or performance. No judgment, just truth. At the last gathering, a man in his 40s stood up and said, "I haven't spoken to my father in 20 years, and for the first time, I think that's okay." The room fell quiet, and then someone clapped, and then another, and before long, he was crying, being held by strangers who understood. Because pain may isolate us, but storytelling pulls us back into the light. I went home that night with my heart full. I curled up next to Liam and whispered, "Can you believe this is our life?" He kissed my forehead. "You earned every piece of it." And I think he's right. I've cried rivers, but I've built bridges too. And as I stand on the other side, I see now I was never too sensitive, never too dramatic, never asked for too much. I was asking the wrong people, but not anymore. Now I ask myself, and I always say yes to softness, to boundaries, to peace, to me, because this right here is the life I chose. And it's enough. It's more than enough. And when people ask if I regret cutting ties with my family, I tell them this. I don't regret choosing peace. I regret waiting so long to believe I deserved it. You're reading this and you're still waiting for permission to let go. Consider this. Your story matters. Your healing matters. And your peace is worth protecting. Always. A few months after the workshop, I got an invitation in the mail. Thick envelope, elegant script. My heart sank when I saw the return address. Rachel. She was having a vow renewal. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the irony was so absurd I didn't know what else to do. I hadn't spoken to her in over 2 years. She hadn't reached out since her last bitter message telling me I'd destroyed the family. And now she wanted me at her celebration of love? For a moment, I stared at the RSVP card, wondering if it was some kind of trap or maybe a guilt play. But mostly I felt numb. I didn't feel excited. I didn't feel nostalgic. I didn't even feel angry, just distant, like I was watching it happen to someone else. I showed Liam the card. He raised an eyebrow. Whoa, that's bold. Do you think I should go? He didn't answer right away. He knew me too well to give a knee-jerk reply. Do you want to go? He asked instead. I shook my head. Not really. Then there's your answer. Simple as that. I placed the card back in the envelope, sealed it, and tossed it in the trash. Not in rage, not in spite, just in peace. Because not every door that opens deserves to be walked through. And not every invitation is an apology. Some are just performance designed to make you feel guilty enough to return to a story you've outgrown. And I had outgrown that story. Later that evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and let myself remember not just the pain, but the girl I used to be. How hard she tried. How much did she give? How little she received. And how even through all of it, she kept believing in the idea of family. That belief had been reshaped now. Not shattered, just remade into something more honest, more earned. My family now looked different. It was Liam. It was the friends who showed up in the rain with wine and bad jokes. It was my workshop circle, those women who cried with me and held space without judgment. It was the people who saw me, not who I used to be, but who I had become. Sometimes I still heard whispers from the past. A memory would flash through my mind, a childhood birthday where no one showed up, a family trip I wasn't invited to. But instead of drowning in the ache, I let it pass like a wave. I learned to breathe through it, to remind myself that the past can't pull you back unless you turn around and reach for it. And I wasn't reaching anymore. I was building forward, always forward. A few weeks later, I received a message from my cousin Amanda. She had gone to Rachel's vow renewal. It was nice, she wrote, but weird without you. I smiled at that, not because I needed to be missed, but because it reminded me that not everyone in my old life had turned away. Some still saw me, some still cared. Amanda ended her message with, "Let's catch up soon. No drama, just us." And that's exactly what we did. Coffee on a quiet Sunday morning. No talk of the past, just soft laughter and gentle updates about life. It was simple, and it was enough. In the months that followed, I continued to grow into this new version of myself. I said yes to things that felt right, no to anything that didn't. I learned how to cook something other than pasta. I traveled alone for the first time. I even rescued a scruffy little dog who now follows me everywhere like a furry shadow. His name is Chance, because that's what life gave me, another chance. To start over, to write new endings, to become someone I was proud of. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. Not to my family, not to the world, just living. And that was the most beautiful aftermath I could have imagined. Some nights I still write letters I'll never send. To Rachel, to Mike, to my parents. Not out of longing, but as a way to release the weight. I tell them how I've grown, how I've laughed more in the past year than I did in a decade of chasing their love. How I've finally learned that Closure isn't something you get from others. It's something you give yourself. And then I fold those letters and tuck them into a box marked letting go. This healing isn't linear, but it is possible. And peace? Peace is a choice you get to make every single day. Today I chose it again, and tomorrow I will too. Sometimes people ask me if I miss them, my siblings, the birthdays, the holidays, the awkward group photos with forced smiles and tension hiding behind every cheese. And honestly, I don't know how to answer that in one sentence because what I miss isn't them. It's the version of them I used to believe existed. I miss the fantasy, the older brothers who'd stand up for me when someone was mean at school, the big sister who'd braid my hair and sneak me snacks during sleepovers, the family dinners where everyone listened, laughed, and stayed off their phones. But that was never real. It was something I stitched together from Disney movies, wishful thinking, and the rare good day that kept me hoping for more. When you finally let go of a dream, grief shows up like a ghost. Not loud, not demanding, just present. I felt it was the first Thanksgiving I spent without them. Liam and I cooked together and made a whole mess of dishes we didn't even finish. And when we sat down to eat, there was silence, not awkward, just new, quiet where there used to be chaos. I remember lifting my glass and saying, "To chosen family." He smiled, "To peace." It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that's something I'll never trade again. This winter, I got a card from my mother, no return address, just thinking of you in cursive across the front. Inside, she'd written, "The house is quiet without you. I hope you're well." No apology, no mention of what had happened, just a sentence heavy with absence. I read it once, then again, and then I put it away. While some part of me appreciated the gesture, another part knew it was too little, too late. Wounds heal, but they remember. I still see them sometimes. In strangers on the street, a man who walks like Mike, a woman with Rachel's laugh. It hits me in flashes, fleeting but sharp. Not enough to reopen the wounds, but enough to remind me they existed. And sometimes when I hear someone say sister with affection in their voice, I feel a pang. A little ache that wonders what could have been. But then Liam walks into the room. Chance jumps into my lap. And I remember I didn't lose everything. I found better. Last week, I spoke at another storytelling night. Different venue, different crowd, same raw truth. I told them how silence became my boundary, how choosing myself came at a cost, but one I'd pay again and again. A man came up afterward, probably in his 60s. He said, "I haven't spoken to my brother in 30 years. I used to feel ashamed about that. Now I feel seen." We hugged. And in that moment, I realized just how universal this pain was. Family by blood isn't always family by soul. Liam and I are planning to move next spring. Nothing drastic, just a little further out of the city, closer to the woods. More trees, more quiet. A place where we can garden and raise Chance and maybe one day raise a kid too. That thought used to terrify me. The idea of being a parent when I had such a fractured family behind me. But now, that feels like a second chance to do it differently, to build something new from the ground up with softness, safety, and space to grow. I know people talk about generational healing like it's a magic wand, but it's not. It's slow, it's deliberate. It's deciding every single day not to repeat the patterns that broke you. And sometimes it's lonely, but it's worth it. Because one day, someone will sit across from you, maybe a child, a friend, and say, "Thank you for choosing better." And in that moment, all the silence, all the grief, all the letting go will feel like the beginning of something beautiful. So if you're reading this and you're still in the thick of it, still wondering if walking away makes you selfish or cold, I want you to hear me clearly. It doesn't. You're not broken for needing peace. You're not dramatic for asking to be loved with respect. And you're not alone. Every boundary you set is a door you close to protect your heart. And behind that door is the life you're allowed to build exactly how you want it. No shame, no guilt, just truth and freedom. Tonight, I'm lighting a candle up for them, but for me, for the girl who sat alone at home while everyone else dressed for a wedding she wasn't invited to, for the young woman who kept shrinking herself just to feel seen, and for the woman I am now. Whole, healing, and finally at peace. A flame flickers softly in the dark. A quiet reminder, I am not who they said I was. I am free, and this freedom is mine to keep. And maybe one day, years from now, I'll bump into one of them at a grocery store. Maybe we'll exchange polite smiles. Maybe we'll even say hello. But there won't be longing. There won't be a wish to go back. Because the life I've built since leaving them behind is real. It's rooted. And more importantly, it's mine. That's the part they never understood. I wasn't walking away to punish them. I was walking towards something better, and I found it.